Welcome everyone to the Emerson Cutler Majestic Theater. Delighted to have you here. I am P. Carl and I am the co-artistic director at ArtsEmerson, which is the presenting and professional presenting and producing arm of Emerson College. We want to thank tonight the Fresh Sound Foundation, who funded this week's artist residency here at Emerson, including master classes, workshops, and tonight's public conversation with renowned author and playwright Claudia Rankine. Woo. Just as a little bit of a teaser for what's to come later on, that Claudia is working with ArtsEmerson on a new play. And we've been working together very closely over this last week as she's been in this residency, getting that play ready to present to you next season. So some exciting news to come. It's amazing to have this crowd here tonight, and we are just proud to be one of many organizations throughout the city who are hosting conversations on race and resiliency. The arts and the theater in particular, throughout time, has been a place, a very important space to steward such kinds of conversations. And at this time in our nation, it just feels more important than ever to create space in arts, in academia, in government, to talk about who we are as America in 2017. I have one bit of set of instructions for you so we're going to do a brief talkback, Claudia and I, after she presents. And if you have a question for her as it comes up during the talkback, since there's so many people, you can use the Twitter hashtag #RankineOnWhiteness. That's #RankineOnWhiteness. You can tweet out. If you have a question, we'll be looking at them backstage, and I'll try to pop a few of those questions into her when I talk to her after. In Boston, we are proud to have a mayor and public servant who is both committed to the arts and to fostering inclusion for all of our city. As a city of first, Boston's Office of Resilience and Racial Equity includes a unique focus on social and economic resilience in a city affected by historic and persistent divisions of race and class. It's conversations like the one we will have today that help propel mutual understanding and positive change. On behalf of myself and my ArtsEmerson colleagues, David House and David Dower, it is my pleasure to welcome our mayor, Martin J. Walsh.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to first of all thank Kyle, and I want to thank David and everyone at ArtsEmerson. I also want to thank Lee Pelton, who's not with us tonight, the president of Emerson. And I just want to say this is not part of my notes. This is just such a beautiful theater. It's one of those, every time you come here, you just appreciate it more and more every time. So I want to welcome you all here and thank you. Certainly, Lee Pelton and ArtsEmerson has made theater spaces to imagine, to create some social change and positive change. Tonight is a wonderful example of that conversation. It's a special opportunity for our city to host an artist like Claudia Rankine. Her groundbreaking work on race and whiteness. Boston is a city with difficult history around race, as we all know. And we have significant racial disparities still in our city today, and something that we're working on because we have to confront our past and also change our present. I think, I was saying that to Claudia backstage, I think now more than ever, we need to continue these dialogues and these conversations in our city of Boston. That's what's going to make us unique, special from the rest of the country. I'm thrilled to see so many Bostonians here tonight and so many wannabe Bostonians here tonight, those who don't live in the city. But I'm not surprised. We have begun this work together. Last fall in this very theater, we held a forum on race. It came after hundreds of conversations around the city of Boston, which came after the fact when I was campaigning for mayor of the city. We talked about having dialogues on race and really addressing the issues of race. In order for us to move forward, we have to heal the past, and it's something that's important. They are hard conversations, and at times they're very difficult conversations, but they're also revealing conversations and moving conversations. We got some predictable criticism. Why do you keep talking? If you want to make change, get to work. I think sometimes of that myself. but I've learned something, how talk really does matter. Race impacts every aspect of lives, so change needs to start in our words and our interactions every single day. The conversation drives the change in more than one way. It's first in our culture. When we speak more openly about race, we feel better and understand the racial injustices that happens to our city. It happens in our city. With those who lived through the trauma, we help deal with it. And the next generation is more free to talk about what's impacting their lives every single day. Another way we make change is by city policy, to make strong policy so you understand the impacts. The impacts doesn't have to happen in a race-neutral environment. Our conversations creates a lens and an awareness and an understanding that can lead to stronger policies and real change. And we have examples. In the Boston Public Schools, we just installed world maps that show Africa and South America in their right size and place. This is going to help our children and our young people imagine their world differently. Our substance abuse prevention study will go deep into how drugs affect each neighborhood in the city of Boston. When we talk about the crisis, there's a lot of conversation going on. Oh, we're only talking about the crisis now because it's a white crisis. Drug addiction is a people crisis. And when we talk about prevention, we have to make sure that prevention is in Roxbury and West Roxbury, in South Boston, in Mattapan, and everywhere in between. We have different types of trauma in our city. We need to learn more about how they are shaped our racial identity. In this conversation, artists have been our guides. Artists are role models for the imagination. They show us, thank you. And that's for the artists, not for me. They show us how to cross boundaries, to see and to dream beyond what we are taught to accept. So it's my honor to introduce somebody who's been doing that her entire career. Claudia Rankine is one of the major poets of our time. Her collection, Citizens, an American Lyric, is the only poetry book to be the New York Times bestseller in nonfiction. She's won too many awards and too many fellowships to name, but I will name one, the National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. And she won't be the last one, because we're going to continue to fight to keep NEA alive for the next generation of artists. Claudia is now a MacArthur Fellow, Foundation Fellow, I should say. She is using this grant to lead a national conversation on the impacts of whiteness in arts and culture. And luckily for Boston, she is the Fresh Sound Master Artist in Residence at Emerson College. Please welcome and give a Boston welcome to author, playwright, teacher, activist, Claudia Rankine. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. It's such an honor to be here. I want to thank Mayor Walsh for that wonderful introduction and for letting me know that the correct way to address you is as Bostonians. Bostonians. I'd love to thank President Pelton and David Dower, David House, P. Carl, for allowing me to be part of the conversation that ArtsEmerson has opened up inside this community. It is an honor for me to be here as part of their family. So I thank them for that. I am just going to dive in. The days following the election Wherever I went, people behaved as if someone had died. People were stern about their grief. It was made clear no one should look away from our new reality. "I'm as well as one can be," was the phrase I repeatedly encountered. I heard it in elevators, stores, taxis, at dinner parties, on personal phone calls, until it was coming out of my own mouth. It was the best we Americans could do to signal our profound recognition of who and what we also were. 7 months earlier, I, like many others, worried that a candidate with overt white nationalist orientation would be our next president. Having just accepted a position at Yale University, I submitted a proposal for a course on the constructions of whiteness. All year I had read historians and theorists, everyone from Matthew Fry Jacobson and Nell Painter to Richard Dreier and Lauren Belant, on how whiteness functions in American culture. The readings both organized events in chronological order, sequence, and theorized much of what we all intuitively knew. I read books on white spaces, white male rage, white depression, and the role of white femininity in American culture. I studied comedy routines from Saturday Night Live, Key and Peele, Louis C.K.
Sorry I'm being so negative. I'm a bummer. I don't know. I shouldn't be. I'm a very, Sorry I'm being so negative. I'm a bummer. I don't know. I shouldn't be. I'm a very, lucky guy. I got a lot going for me. I'm healthy. I'm relatively young. I'm white, which thank God for that shit, boy. That is a huge leg up. Are you kidding me? Oh, God, I love being white. I really do. Seriously, if you're not white, you're missing out, because this shit is thoroughly good. But let me be clear, by the way. I'm not saying that white people are better. I'm saying that being white is clearly better. Who could even argue? If it was an option, I would re-up every year. Oh, yeah, I'll take white again. Absolutely. I've been enjoying that. I'm going to stick with white. Thank you. Here's how great it is to be white. I could get in a time machine and go to any time, and it would be fucking awesome when I get there. That is exclusively a white privilege. Black people can't fuck with time machines. A black guy in a time machine is like, hey, anything before 1980? No, thank you. I don't want to go. But I can go.
And Amy Schumer, among others, and played and replayed commercials for their take on American aspirations. I wished to build a syllabus that showed not only what the culture was saying, but also what we were seeing. My teaching assistants and I gathered images that reflected or complicated the arguments being made by the culture about what whiteness looks like and stands for, while it services, in the words of David Shai, an unjust and inequitable historical process working in its favor. We pored over Whitney Dow's The Whiteness Project and Christian Lander's blog, The Stuff White People Like. We'd put phrases into Google search like boys being boys. So you might pay attention to who gets to be a boy. Those algorithms. To see, okay, so we put phrases into Google search like boys being boys to see what and who the algorithms would bring forward. And in the spirit of Benjamin Eleanor Adam, we did Google image searches. Adam's search for the word evolution tended to portray the height of evolution as the body of a white male. Thus, and this is a quote, relating whiteness and humanity, an association that has its roots in racial science and ethical justifications of colonialism, slavery, and genocide. Close quotes. I was not intending an exhaustive introduction to the subject of whiteness, but rather a reading and viewing experience that could generate discussions in a mixed race class company that need not pause for the good manners of social life, that excluded any form of discomfort. As their black professor, I was perhaps a little desperate to communicate to my students that they weren't in the class to help me have a better life. Fred Moten was the jarring music in my head, and this is a quote from him, "I don't need your help. I just need you to recognize that this shit is killing you too, however much more softly." And then I have an ellipsis, but he ends the quote, "You stupid motherfucker." Over 100 students. I'm just gonna go ahead. This is me in the class. Over 100 students arrived the first day, a little over 2 months before the presidential election, for a class that could hold a quarter of that number. They were of every ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation. Some had mixed race parents. Some knew their family members to be racist. Some felt victimized by the effects of white dominance, while others felt guilt. All wanted us as a country to do better. And I personally was encouraged by their presence, since their desire to be in the class already indicated a level beyond pessimism, which simply breeds, in the words of Linda Martin Alcoff in The Future of Whiteness, the fatalism that excuses inaction and complicity. We began the semester with the students articulating their own understanding of how the concept of race developed in America. It's a byproduct of colonialism, many of the historically minded said. One student wrote a fairy tale. Once upon a time, the white people lived in the daylight, and the people of color lived at night. Then one day, the whites decided they needed the time, or some more time, or all the time. I don't recall the student's exact wording, but I do remember the feeling in class was that she had captured a truth by calling to mind language like darky, the dark continent, the Enlightenment, the heart of darkness, and so on. As all the talk about darkness led us to key questions we would discuss that semester. Questions like why we perceive others the way we do. And that led us to Shirley cards. How many people in the audience know what a Shirley card is? So a few of you do. Shirley cards, which are reference cards used to determine exposure and colored balance in film, especially for skin tone, seemed a neutral place to begin. So I'm just going to play a short video.
This is a Shirley card. And if you developed color film between the 1940s and the 1990s, the accuracy of the colors in your photos were pretty much based on this skin tone.
Shirley was probably the name of the first person who was pictured on the cards, and Shirley became the subsequent name of all the women pictured on the cards.
That's Lorna Roth, a professor and researcher at Concordia University in Montreal.
Usually they were white women who wore very colorful dresses.
Color film works like this. There are layers of chemicals stacked on each other that are sensitive to different colors of lights. And there are a series of different types of chemical solutions that are used to develop them once exposed to that light. a combination of all of these chemicals creates a film's color balance. And for many decades, chemicals that would bring out various reddish, yellow, and brown tones were largely left out.
The consumer market that was designated in the design of film chemistry was that of the lighter-skinned market. So when it came to defining what an idealized international skin tone would be, it turned out to be a lighter skin tone than a darker skin tone. If you're shooting people with lighter skins, it looks good. If you're shooting people with darker skins, it doesn't look so good. If you're shooting mixed race in the same screen, then we see the real problems.
It wasn't until the 1970s where things started to change, and it came from a very unlikely source.
Companies that were advertising different kinds of wood furniture were complaining that Kodak film did not render the difference between dark-grained wood and light-grained wood.
The other companies that Kodak responded to were chocolate makers, because the film couldn't render the difference between dark chocolate and milk chocolate. As the film and television industries became more diverse, color balance issues at the professional level became even more apparent. And in the 1990s, a team of designers at Philips in Breda, Holland, tackled the issue head-on by developing a camera system that used two different computer chips to balance lighter and darker skin tones individually.
First people to buy these cameras for television, they were called the LDK series, were Oprah Winfrey and Black Entertainment Television, like people who were very aware of these issues.
It was around this time that the white Shirley card was joined by the black Shirley card and the Latino Shirley card and the multiracial Shirley card. And Kodak's Gold Max marketing campaign emphasized their film's improved dynamic range.
One of the things that they said about Gold
We followed that up by looking at commercials, mostly Chinese, Thailand, there are some in Japanese, commercials where black men were run through, for example, run through the washer to reemerge clean, and I'll show you one or two of those.
改变只需一颗俏皮洗衣溶珠，俏皮全国招生热线400-800-5086。
ใช่เขาอะแค่คอยหลบแดดอยู่แต่ที่เย็นๆจนค่อยๆขาวขึ้นอย่างเป็นธรรมชาติใน 10.4 ล้านสัปดาห์
仲有كمان لوكยินดีด้วยที่คุณเกิดเป็นมนุษย์เวอรีนาแอลกลูตาเบอร์รี่พลัสมีกลูตาไทโอน250มิลลิกรัม
I have a lot of talents, but I did not make those commercials. They actually exist. The semester's first shared text, Whiteness of a Different Color, presented Matthew Fry Jacobson's argument that one of our country's earliest attempts to equate citizenship with whiteness came with the Naturalization Act of 1790, which limited voting right to free white Anglo-Saxon men. Given that black people were still named property, This hold on self-governance was situated against others now commonly understood to be white. Those were the Irish, the Jews, the Poles, the Greeks, etc. The Immigration Act, or more specifically the Johnson-Reed Act of 1924, made it clear, as Jacobson explained, that, and this is a quote, Europeanness, that is to say whiteness, was among the most important possession you could lay claim to. The act maintained the quota system based on nationality and declared Arabs and Asians completely barred, this is 1924, completely barred from naturalized citizenry in the States. So they could come, but they could not become naturalized citizens. Jacobson worked to help the students understand how racial difference was a political and cultural construct that has always been determined by white men in our country. This text also gave them a timeline for the development of the white supremacist terror group, the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, recently re-energized by the presidential campaign. Everyone in the class was aware of the KKK and its tenets of white supremacy. What we didn't know was that these white nationalists came into formation after the Civil War. And they came in directly after. They were actually Confederate soldiers. In tandem with the legislative black codes, which were intended to take rights away from newly freed blacks by keeping them out of the economy and government. So that's, so on the one hand, you had the activity of the KKK, burning down communities, killing people, lynching people, etc. And then you had the implementation of the black codes systemically at the same time. The KKK's second reign of terror occurred between 1915 and 1940 in response to the immigration of Catholics, hence the burning of crosses. According to Jacobson, the expansion of their attention moved their stronghold from the South to the Midwest and the West. And in some ways, what happened in the Midwest and the West was as bad. I hate that was worse. It was as bad. Partly because you had sundown towns where black people would, and people of color would come into work, but they were, it was illegal to live in the towns. In the South, you can actually live there. So the terror across the Midwest and the West, people like to think, oh, it's the South. It's not the South. It's the United States. Not until the 1950s, with the beginnings of the civil rights movement, did white nationalists stop fighting among themselves for the purity of their whiteness and turn their attention as socially constructed Caucasians, and this is a quote, the 20th century reconsolidation of the 19th century Slavs, Hebrews, Mediterranean, and Celts, to the terrorization of American blacks and minorities from non-European countries. So up until then, it was about WASP, white Anglo-Saxon, European descent, and everybody else. The people, Irish came in, the passports were stamped black. So there was this fight to keep the purity of whiteness inside Europe. And then when the civil rights movement, forget all that. Everybody white is white because we can say so. I mean, it's that arbitrary in a sense. This attention was complete, so the move towards the terrorization of American blacks and minorities, this attention was complete, and the terror occurred physically in the forms of shootings, lynchings, fire, hoses, and dogs, and institutionally in terms of legislative policies affecting education, housing, and the justice system. The class considered the rhetoric of making America great again, not just in terms of its political aspirations towards white nationalism, but also in terms of the cultural framing that was done by 19th century American photographers. I fell off my picture. That's the book by Jacobson, Whiteness of a Different Color, which I recommend to you all. That's the KKK, in case you... I wanted to include that picture because it's from 1925, because we don't see it often. That's I'm going somewhere. I don't want those. I'm going there. So the class considered the rhetoric of Making America Great Again not just in terms of its political aspirations towards white nationalism, but also in terms of its cultural framing that was done by 19th and 20th century photographers like Carlton Watkins and Ansel Adams, whose images reflected in monumental scale an American landscape that supported notions of white greatness and white ownership of this country. So that the acculturation of what America means, its greatness, was coming on every front, and also in the photography. Even some, though not all, he had some very intimate portraits of Adams' images of interned Japanese Americans in Manzanar are dwarfed by the majestic California mountain range surrounding the camps. So what you're looking at, though you wouldn't know it, is Making America Great Again. Every class discussion was ghosted by the underground consideration of what it means for Americans to aspire to white dominance. The theorist Lauren Ballon's cruel optimism another book that I recommend to you all, helped us think through the condition of maintaining an attachment to a significantly problematic object. But even as we spoke about this, one student asked why the syllabus didn't reflect more historical examples of individual white benevolence. Now looking back, I might have handled discussions touching on white abolitionists and civil rights activists differently. But in the moment, I was bemused that the student wished me to turn my attention away from the problems of systemic white dominance in order to create a more palatable narrative for her. And though I was also trying to be vigilant against narrowing my gaze to the overwhelming deaths contributing to Black grievance, I couldn't think of a good example of systemic and sustained white advocacy for Blacks in a culture with the trajectory of slavery to Jim Crow to the rare housing of Blacks in prisons. I, perhaps out of desperation, pointed out that we had read Thomas Jefferson's Notes on the State of Virginia as an example of a complicated advocacy for Black freedom by a founding father. You know, what's funny about Jefferson is a European, I think he was French, told Jefferson that he would pay him to free his slaves. Because Jefferson said he didn't have enough money to free his slaves because you'd have to give them land. So the guy says, you know, when I die, I'm gonna leave you money and then you can free your slaves. And so that's what happened. But Jefferson didn't accept the money because he had actually, he was quite a spendthrift, and he would go to Europe and buy wine and paintings and books, bought a lot of books. And he mortgaged Monticello and the slaves up against his purchases, so he couldn't afford, actually, to free them. The students used the term white privilege with an ease and frequency that suggested they had stopped interrogating how deeply its connotations shaped the white consciousness. The phrase was brought forward in 1988 by Wesley professor Peggy McIntosh. In White Privilege and Male Privilege, a personal account of coming to see, correspondence through work in women's studies. McIntosh enumerated 46 ways in which white privilege gets enacted. She would subsequently disown the term because the word privilege makes white dominance seem a desired state. I told the students I preferred Robin DiAngelo's term, internalized dominance. DiAngelo states that, and this is a quote, "For the dominant group being socialized to see the minoritized group as inferior necessarily conveys that the dominant group is superior. The sense of superiority is often not explicit, but internalized deep beneath the surface. The process causes members of the dominant group to see themselves as normal, real, correct, and more valuable, thus more entitled to the resources of society." DiAngelo is also responsible for introducing the phrase white fragility, which she defines as a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves in white people. These reactions can end discussions or lives. This fragility, DiAngelo argues, stems from the inability of individual whites to understand that racism encompasses economic, political, social, and cultural structures, actions, and beliefs that systemize and perpetuate an unequal distribution of privileges, resources, and power between white people and people of color. This is why I found the students' requests for examples of good white people beside the point of the class. The insistence on individual benevolence allows whites not to see themselves as part of a systemized dynamic of supremacy defining our American lives. In other words, part of white privilege, if we use that, or the idea of internalized dominance, is the sense that white people are individuals and not part of a group, and therefore not benefiting from the benefits of that group. When I arrived in the classroom the morning following Trump's victory, let's see if I have a slide for that, I don't know. Oh. My students said nothing. Instead, they sat uncharacteristically silent and waited for me to speak. I looked around the room and decided to express my personal fear, the fear that seemed to me behind our newly programmed responses. Things are about to get bad in ways we will and will not see, I said. I could think of nothing else to add. The week's reading, perhaps ironically, was on the white imagination. Linda Martin Alcoff's The Future of Whiteness considered, and this is a quote, the bounds of our collective pessimism about racism, and in particular about white racism. She wrote about white exceptionalism, which she defined as the idea that whiteness is so distinct as a form of social identity and so problematically tied to its supremacist illusions that it cannot be redeemed. The question for the class as a group and for each of us individually and for Alcoff herself was, what would it mean to redeem whiteness? Was that even the right question? The election was over and Jill Stein's eventual recount efforts were not going to save us. The weight of the darkness felt palpable in and outside the classroom. Many, let's define many as the popular vote. Many were thrown into what historian Jelani Cobb called a malaise, but what I will call a national depression. What devastated us was not that a Republican had won the election. This had happened many times in our individual and collective lifetimes, and it did not send us to bed, give us migraines, stomach cramps, bring tears to our eyes, or any of the other physical reactions that were described to me or experienced by me. Never before had we raided our sewing boxes for safety pins as a visual marker of separation from self-identified white nationalists, despite having lived through the likes of Bull Connor, George Wallace, Strom Thurmond, the Reagan years, and many other public officials and historical moments defined by racist, homophobic, and xenophobic viewpoints. What was different this time was that we had voted in a bullying machine intent on rerouting the arc of history from the heretofore inconstant and uneven promise of inclusion to a defensive and exclusionary stance. Angry White Men, American Masculinity at the End of an Era by Michael Kimmel proved especially impactful. Kimmel interviews a cross-section of men who express beliefs like, and this is a quote, "We're going down the fucking toilet, that's what I mean. Just look around, there's illegals everywhere. There's Wall Street screwing everybody, we got a fucking nigger in the White House, we're all screwed." The students felt they knew versions of these men. Kimmel insists white male rage knows no class and is tied to notions of masculinity and entitlement. What keeps the anger alive, according to Kimmel, is what sociologist Sarah Sabijé and political scientist Jeffrey Berry call outrage media, talk radio, blog, and cable news. This rage, not surprisingly, runs parallel to the increased suicide rates for white men, as well as their increased drug use in the past year. The mortality rates rise have been going up for white people in general between the ages of 25 and 65. Some of it cancer, some of it, but a lot of it suicide, opiate use, etc. I mean, it used to be black men held that place. Only time will tell if the suicide rates would reverse with an executive branch whose rhetoric so closely engages their grievances. Probably not, because it's actually tied to a sense of not receiving something they felt they were entitled to. The class viewed images of Norma and Norman, two sculptures from the 1934 World's Fair that represented normal Americans as determined by artist Abram Belsky and obstetrician-gynecologist Robert Littell Dickinson. The naked sculptures of two white figures represented the evolved and healthy archetype of American citizens. These images brought the class to discussions about beauty as it equates to who is valued. Nell Painter's chapters on the beauty ideal in the history of white people, another book I recommend to you, were invaluable as she made clear, and this is a quote, the concept of human beauty as a scientifically certified racial trait. Some mixed-race students were particularly interested in interrogating the primacy of white feminine beauty, given that their mothers were white women whom they loved truly, madly, and deeply. After beginning the semester intending to focus on white femininity, these mixed-race women who identified as Black all shifted their paper topics before the end of the term. Personally, I wondered how they parsed the cultural understanding that they would never be valued or given the benefit of the doubt as casually as their own mothers. They, in the course, had stumbled into critiquing the whiteness in themselves. In general, the level of critique among the students of white patriarchy stayed steady, but what gained ambivalence was a look at white femininity, especially given Hillary Clinton's loss and the deep roots of misogyny that also contributed to her defeat. Reading the final papers at the end of term, I was moved by one student's description of a white female student living among students of color who avoided her suite mates after the election. She would slip out early and return late, not wanting to discuss the election results. The other women who had previously considered her their friend felt abandoned in their sadness and fears, according to the writer of the essay. Strangely, the suddenly displaced white student also brought to mind Jennifer Cramblett, who sued an Ohio sperm bank in 2014 after she gave birth to a mixed-race child. Patricia Williams, the attorney who lives here, I believe, points out in The Value of Whiteness that due to the mistaken insemination and subsequent unplanned relationship to Blackness, Crambeck felt she lost access to her mobility in white spaces because of her proximity to Blackness, occasioned by her daughter's birth. Law professor Cheryl I. Harris, in Whiteness as Property, points out that whiteness and property share a common premise, a conceptual nucleus of a right to exclude. The sperm bank took this right away from Cramblett, just as the election took away our unconscious tendency not to consider systemic white racism and xenophobia. The distress and feelings of isolation my students experience made me understand that the fact that this country was founded on genocide and sustained by the continued enslavement and warehousing of African Americans was unfortunate. But we wanted to believe that we were a melting pot that was both truth and fiction. Humanity as a concept had our respect. That was both truth and fiction. We thought we understood our social arrangement to be ultimately tied to decency because our American rhetoric did not include, whatever our history, the swearing in of white nationalism. We could not conceive of people voting for that of their own free will, because we were not racists at our core. And as even former Vice President Cheney pointed out, our president's ban on Muslims, and this is a quote, goes against everything we stand for and believe in, close quote. Despite our history of war against these same people, the banning of them from American soil is not who we are at our core. We believed in our basic humanity. While unarmed people were shot dead in the streets, we thought we were inherently good, while fellow citizens in Flint, Michigan were being poisoned by their drinking water. We meant well, while queer and transgender communities were targeted and denied rights. We believed in our goodness, while undocumented people were rounded up and criminalized in detention centers. We remained exceptionalists while Muslim Americans were targeted by other Americans, and while Native Americans were being hosed, maimed, and caged at Standing Rock. We believed in our gated communities and our gentrification and the neighbors and colleagues our lifestyles created. We believed political correctness was addressing the specificity of injustice, and to paraphrase Teju Cole, our passivity gestured to a world with racism, but no racists. Misogyny without misogynists. Homophobia without homophobes. Anti-Semitism without anti-Semites. Bigotry without bigots. In short, America without Americans. What was galling is this, that the election tainted all Americans, including the dominated ones, with white supremacist complicity. When the election results were declared, we Americans, no matter our race, religion, or gender, were outed as affiliated with white Americans wanting to hold in place our ability to call this country white. When we understood finally that whatever else we are also this human dignity killing machine, we took to our beds and closed our doors. And like my student's sweet mate, avoiding facing what we didn't wish to see, discuss, or engage. Too soon, we began saying, we don't think Americans elected this administration. Or, it's only 4 years. Or, give them a chance. Or, we believe in the democratic process. Actually, that's been working out for us. We don't know yet what they will do. Now we do. Or, we lived through Reaganomics. Or, this is my favorite, he will be impeached. In other words, in American fashion, we began to walk back the horror we were forced to face on November 8th, 2016, when history named us all white nationalists. A blind belief in our basic goodness is what carried us here. This was Obama's belief too. And the charisma of that message is what magnetized people to him. Going over my course material from the class as a reminder of what we had covered during the semester, I clicked on a link of Amy Schumer's skit from Inside Amy Schumer.
Girl, it ain't no lie, just look deep into my eyes. You're perfect and I think you should know that you don't need no lipstick, you don't need no blush, 'cause you've got that inner natural glow. Magazines say that you're whack, girl, don't believe it. Just leave that tabloid trash on the rack. Girl, don't you read that? You're beautiful and who cares what they think. Now watch that love and face off in the sink. In the scene, girl. Girl, you don't need makeup. You're perfect when you wake up. Just walk around like that all day. Wipe that goof off of your face. I'll take you to a special place. It's something that I've got to say. Wipe it off. Wipe it up. Wipe it off. Wipe it up. Hold up, girl. We spoke too soon. With this whole no makeup tune, kinda changed our mind on the makeup thing. You'll be the hottest girl in the nation with just a touch of foundation. Girl, I can't be seen with the ghost from the rain. I didn't know that your lashes were so stubby and pale. Just a little mascara and you'll look female. Please listen, girl, what we're trying to say. Just get up an hour earlier and you can make yourself much girlier. Much girlier. Girl, you don't need makeup. You're perfect when you wake up. Just don't go outside like that, okay? Just a little makeup, some natural looking makeup. What more do I have to say? Just put it on. Put it on. I'm trying. Just put it on. Put it on. Say na 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 na. That's not enough, girl. What? Na 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 na. Girl, I wanna get real with you. I got a lot of regrets in my life. I regret missing my father's funeral to audition for The Voice. I regret being high when my niece was born. But most of all, I regret telling you not to wear makeup. That's on me. But what's on you is hopefully more makeup. See, it's like I tore up the shag carpet assuming there were hardwood floors underneath. But it turned out to be just dirty linoleum. These are just metaphors, girl. But they are about your face. Girl, you do need makeup. Lots and lots of makeup. Think of a clown and then work your way back. You are great except your face, girl. So don't take off your makeup. Wear it when you sleep and swear we met someone else burnt out.
Schumer's skit made it clear how difficult it is, even for the 53% of white women who voted for Trump, to live up to the standard images of white femininity, thus coupling patriarchy with the modes of dominance that have subjugated American citizens. The truth was, many white women historically had joined forces with white supremacists in dominating others. In their silence, as well as their actions, white women have historically been culpable in the violence. Women like Carolyn Bryan Dunham, who admitted to lying that she claimed when she claimed Emmett Till whistled at her before he was murdered by her husband and brother. The chapter titled Light of the World in Richard Dryer's White discusses how white women were lit in Hollywood films to create the image of white femininity as celestial and angelic. The use of backlighting ensured blonde hair looked blonde, which helped support the claim, and this is a quote, that what made whites special as a race was their non-physical, spiritual, indeed ethereal qualities. End of quote. Ethereal does not, however, have anything to do with being ethical. When the Women's March on Washington was announced, presumably by the other 47% of white women, it was the first time many of those women had organized as a group and identified as a community in opposition to our anatomy-grabbing president. The photographs of the marches were staggeringly beautiful, if one can see beauty in the organized will of a people. Millions came together to say no to an America that was poised to say no to so many others. The beauty of these crowds all over the country and the world both elated and saddened me. Elated because these communities of strangers pointed to our potential. But I was also saddened by the nagging question of where all these white women were when Black Americans were being gunned down in American cities. Abandoned after Hurricane Katrina, subject to voter suppression, and on and on. Where had they been? The thought, in the words of the Peruvian poet Cesar Vallejo, hit me with its sadness. I felt compelled to admonish myself for thinking about the former absence in the face of so much presence. If I was infuriated by the previous and heartless disregard, I was just as humbled by the 4.5 million gathered in solidarity against the stated agenda of the new administration. After September 11th, Louis Lampin wrote, and this is a quote, "No sum of historical justification can excuse the attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. But neither can we excuse our own arrogance behind the scenes of shock and disbelief. Enthralled by an old script, we didn't see the planes coming because we didn't think we had to look." Close quote. It seems old habits die hard. Though Trump's run-up to power began with the birther movement, quote, "I'm starting to think he was not born here," close quote, with its challenge to President Obama's citizenry, many Americans will insist they didn't see his presidency coming. We might ask ourselves why we weren't looking. And now that we are here, I hear the sentiment that it's good to have the hypocrisy of the veiled white supremacist agenda of our country uncovered and out in the open. The real question of the moment is not how powerful are we, but how powerless are we? How irredeemable are we? It is possible to create a path. Is it possible to create a path towards what has never existed but fueled our beliefs? We are all connected. As a naturalized citizen, I am as connected to the ones who say, "Go back to where you came from," as I am to the ones who say, "You are safe." It occurs to me now that what I should have said to my students the week after the election was that what will be done in this administration will be done in our name. This is not the time for impotency. Civic action is suddenly synonymous with living. Thank you very much.
So we're just going to have a short conversation. Claudia and I are going to talk just a little bit, and I have a few questions that you've sent us through Twitter. I saw that Rankine on Whiteness was trending in Boston, so it's good. It's great. Claudia, you and I we've... Okay, we'll turn up the sound. Did you get that sound message there? Great. Is that better? Great, excellent. Claudia, thank you for that so much, and thank you for being here. It's such an honor, and you and I've had, we spent a lot of time together, we have spent a lot of time together in this last year, making a play and having a lot of conversations about the things that you're writing. And one of the things I wanted to ask you was that, you know, I keep thinking of your students' faces post-election, and I'm looking at this incredible filled theater and the sense of urgency that I know everyone in this audience feels. We just, you know, are all following a non-vote today on a new healthcare act. And so there's this urgency. You can feel the urgency in the audience. But knowing you, I know you felt this urgency all along. Does anything change for you? Is there a pre-election urgency and a post-election urgency, or is the work the same for you?
Well, I think there is a new urgency. I think that I will continue working as a writer in the way that I've always worked, but I do think as a citizen, my habits might change. They have changed. I now feel irresponsible if I don't check the news in the morning. So I now understand that more will be asked of me. I'm not the kind of person who usually would have gone to rallies or protests, but, you know, we can change. And so no, I think it's one thing to buy into the myth that all of this is new. It's not new. It's not new. But what is new is the blatant disregard for the First Amendment. You know, there are new things. And I think we as American citizens have to be vigilant in the ways that we should have been vigilant before. But now we don't have a pass.
There's a question from the audience that I'm going to read. Given the historical roots of racism in the U.S., is the American experiment worth continuing, and do you think redemption is possible? In 30 words or less.
I don't know, you know, I don't know who wrote that question, but I don't know if they have children. You know, we are here, we have brought forward another generation of people. It is our responsibility to make this thing work. And part of making it work is to understanding how it's broken. And part of understanding how it's broken is understanding that whiteness is made up of racism. Like, that's part of it. These false conversations around I'm not racist, let's stop that. Let's just move forward.
I'd love to talk about that a little bit. One of the things that have been so interesting about getting to know you well is that we've been at many dinner parties where I watch people, mostly I just watch people try to prove themselves not racist to you. It's a fascinating, to encounter. And as we've been talking about making theater, one of the questions we've been asking is, can a white person and a black person have an authentic conversation about race, and how does that happen?
I feel like I'm being set up. Well, that is the question. That is what we have been working on with the new play, is how do you stage the conversation that has stalled so many times before? And that is the biggest conundrum in my creative life right now. How do you make that happen? So, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
It's going to happen. You know, I just want to unpack a little bit of the talk, and then we won't spend too much time up here. But a couple things that really, and I saw as I was watching the Twitter feed, this idea of internalized dominance versus white privilege. First of all, that white privilege came about in 1988. Is that really, like, it's really the first time it was mentioned? That's just such a remarkable thing. But can you talk a little bit about why internalized dominance, and just unpack that a little bit for the audience?
Well, for me, you know, you can actually go online and watch. I sometimes, when I'm relaxing, I Google Robin DiAngelo and watch her talk about internalized dominance. You think I jest? This happens. The term is incredibly useful to me because it begins the discussion after the moment when you say white people are racist, and not feel defensive around that. Everything in the culture has worked overtime to allow white people to feel that dominance. And no individual in these United States could have avoided it, no matter what their intentions are. There is no stepping outside the culture. And one of the reasons I wanted to start with some of the commercials internationally around the bleaching creams is that for the Asian population, for the Arab population, for the Black population, we have all known that whiteness is the most valuable thing. Not white people, but whiteness is the most valuable thing. So that's why people are using bleaching creams that cause cancer, you know? Like, they'll go that far. That's why they're making those commercials in China and Thailand and Japan and Africa. Because they're not dummies. They want the jobs. They want what whiteness affords white people. It's just the way it is. So, you know, one of the things I've been thinking about, and this is me pretending I remember what the question was. Is how to demonstrate in the play, and Carl knows this, what it means to stand inside the notion of white dominance and still be able to move into an ethical position. Like, that's really what would redeem whiteness, yeah? The recognition that the dominance is there. And given that, what do we do now?
And the other thing that you talked about inside this question of white dominance was white distress. You sort of glanced on that question of white distress. And I wondered, because it feels such a central piece of where we are politically right now, I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about your understanding of that.
Well, there's a piece in the Wall Street Journal. You know, not everything is random. I have the name of the person on my hand here. Betsy McKay wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal recently, and it's about the study done by 2 Princeton economists on the fact that for white people, the mortality rate is rising. And it's rising because of an increase in opiate use and suicide. And it's 26 to 65 years, so it's across the spectrum. And it's usually in the category of people who don't have a college degree. And that would seem like it's pointing to economics, right? But that would also mean that African Americans in that category or Asian Americans in that category would also be committing suicide, but they're not. So why are white people suddenly so depressed? They're depressed because this idea of dominance, this internalized dominance, was meant to play out in their lives. And suddenly, due to many things, outsourcing, technology, due to many things, they don't have jobs, they don't have health insurance, they don't have a lot of things. And other people, like black people, let's say, who don't have those things, are like, oh, we never had those things. But white people are like, wait, you said that those things were rights. I had the right to those things. I mean, when you have people like the guy who came to New York and stabbed that guy the other day, and you have people like Dinah Roof going into the Bible study and shooting all those people. Sure, that's racism. But there's something else tied to it. It's a sense that something has gone very wrong in my life. The easy answer is, it must be the black person. The black guy did it. So I need to kill them. So all you black people, you better start getting those vests. They cost $400. But there's also true despair. It's a real despair. And it has to do with the sense that these things were my right as a white person. You told me I was white, so therefore, all of these resources were mine. All of this mobility was mine. And now I don't have it. So I'm going to take myself out, and I might take some of you all out with me. So I think that's what's going on with that.
Yeah, and then I guess just a final question. I'd love to bring it, to just this question of the power of art and your work. Your book, Citizen, really changed the conversation about race in this country, I think, in a very deep way. Also, your writings for the New York Times. You and I have had some conversations. I feel like when you started writing about Serena Williams, suddenly everybody started to think she was a great tennis player. And I noticed, nobody ever mentioned Serena Williams, and then your book came out and you wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, and then Serena, everybody was like, Serena, go Serena, go Serena. And I feel like your work really has had such impact in showing us the importance of art in changing the conversation that we're having in this country about race. And I just wonder if you can talk about, as an artist, you kind of mentioned this at the top, but just how you're sort of projecting out your life as an artist inside the frame of this conversation that you're still sort of trying to get at. Like, how important is it to have time to be an artist? And I think about that with the funding of the NEA going away, and our sense that so many artists, I think, right now feel like, oh, I don't have time to do art, I have to go do these other things. And I'm just wondering how you stay connected to it inside the urgency.
Well, I think one of the things that is amazing about artists is that, am I calling myself amazing? I don't know. But one of the things that's amazing about artists is you never did it for the money. That was never that was never the thing that was motivating you in the first place. And so I feel like we will continue to work, because whatever that drive is that brings people, we were in a workshop in New York earlier this week, and around the development of the play. And at one point, I looked at this table, and there were a dozen people around the table making a piece of art. Spending their time, they're bringing the sort of full commitment of their imaginative, professional drive and will towards the creation of this piece. And it was one of those moments I did not interrupt what was going on to share that thought at the moment, but it made me proud to be in that room. So I think artists, they didn't do it in the first place because they could avoid doing it. I don't know what it looked like for you, Carl, but when I graduated from Williams, I went to work in a law firm. And I was sure I was going to go to law school. My parents were immigrants. I'm an immigrant. Can you imagine the conversation? So, I think I might be a poet. That's what I'm thinking. My parents would have been like, what is that? Excuse me? And so, it took me something like 4 years to back out of that law firm. And I did because I had to, because there was something in me that was pushing me forward in terms of what language can do. And the only reason I was interested in what language can do was because I knew its profound effect on me. felt as a reader. I knew what I had learned in the theater. So I think that the issue of defunding of the NA, it's tragic. It's tragic that a first world country would even consider that. But there are always two things. There is the reality of the tragedy, and then there are us, the will of the people. So this is it. We're inside the will of the people. And what I'm curious to see is how far it will get us.
I think it goes without saying that I'm speaking on behalf of this entire audience, but I never cease to be amazed by your genius and generosity, the combination of the two. We are so grateful to have you here this evening, and thank you so much, Claudia Rankine.